Hi, and welcome to Inside the Fairbanks at the Fairbanks Museum and Planetarium. My name is Hannah Buckner, and I'm one of the AmeriCorps members here at the museum. For over a month now, you've been following us as we go through different exhibits and show you what we have on exhibit. But now we're going to be sort of transitioning to a little bit behind the scenes. So you also notice if you've been watching for a while, things are a little bit different this time around. Beau, who is our collections director, we are switching places a little bit for the next couple of weeks. So I will be in my apartment and Beau will be in the museum actually showing you around. So today we're actually going to be talking about dioramas. And if you aren't really aware of what those are, or maybe you haven't touched it since you were in elementary school, or if you're in elementary school, maybe you were doing this or you were going to before the pandemic hit, or if you actually haven't ever done this before. A diorama is actually in modern times, a diorama now is just a representation of something on a smaller form, or if it's regular sized, it is showing an environment that we maybe can't step into, or we can, but it's taking it to a different place. And so Beau will be telling you more about a specific type of diorama that was done by Balch, who we have a lot of his dioramas here at the museum. But I thought I'd give you a little information about what a diorama is if you've never actually heard of it. So I actually have a few examples of a diorama here. So more of the more common thing that you do typically for school projects are shoebox dioramas, which you'll see in the bottom right. And that's where you take a shoebox and you take the top and the bottom and you kind of flip them so that it forms a right angle. And usually you do scenes from history or a book, sometimes from a movie, that's what you're doing, or something that you're studying. I actually had to do several dioramas in school, and for an English project, I remember in, I think it was 6th grade, I did a diorama with a shoebox to make for Harry Potter and talking about J.K. Rowling. So that was really fun. But also I remember doing shoebox dioramas of the book Hatchet, and using that to delve deeper into aspects of that book. And so we see these are pretty popular with younger kids in school. And then if you look to the upper right, that is a miniature. It's actually part of a project that I found online of a vintage ring boxes or other like vintage containers, and then artists created little scenes in there. So you can see that in this antique ring box, it's a forest scene with a couple who seems to be picnicking, and artists become very detailed, and you can actually see that in another thing on the left. And this is also called a miniature, even though it's very big. It's a miniature of a town or a city, and people often who make these are using natural resources or resources that look like moss or trees. You can actually find these a lot in, I don't know what is around in Vermont, but I know in New Jersey there's a store called Michael's, and you can get that. You can go there and get resources for things like dioramas. So this is a diorama of a city. I believe it's being used for role playing. And actually, if you are a fan of Harry Potter, I know we talk about Harry Potter a lot in my classes. Harry Potter, at least in the movies, when they have the aerial shots of Hogwarts, which means that they're shooting around the buildings, that's actually a mixture of CGI, so camera graphics, and a miniature that they have of the Hogwarts castle. And you can actually find really cool pictures of that online. and you can actually tour it at the Warner Brothers studio in London. So that's just a little glimpse to different types of dioramas that there are. There's many different types, and they've been around for a very long time. Actually, there's a different meaning from the 19th century. So I encourage you to check that out. And I really hope that you get to enjoy learning about Balch's dioramas that he made and that we have on exhibit here at the museum. So thank you and have a wonderful day. Enjoy the video.
Everyone, to this week's edition of Inside the Fairbanks. Today we're going to be talking about how William Balch created some of the intricate parts for his very interesting and lifelike dioramas, which we've highlighted a few other times in these segments. But we haven't really talked too much about how they were created. So William Balch was from Lunenburg, Vermont. He was a very gifted taxidermist and artist, and so today we're going to show you how some of the techniques of how he created parts for his habitat groupings. So I'm going to show you here the muskrats grouping that we have. This is one that shows, it's the only one that we have that shows both the winter and summer habitat. And you can see here, there's the winter, one of the lodges or dens that the muskrats created. And you can see Balch created all this imitation snow here, and underneath the ice there you can see a couple of muskrats and other things, a couple of shells, which are actual real shells that he had access to. And on this side we see some flowers and lily pads, and this is supposed to be water on this side, and then all these reeds and a dragonfly that was collected by presumably Balch to include here. And then when we come around to this side, we can see some leaves, which are fake leaves. You might wonder what is real and what is not real in this. The mounts, of course, are real, the animals, but most of the things like the leaves are not actually real leaves, but were created by Balch. And you can see that in most of what he included in his groupings, but in most of his groupings. So now I'll take you upstairs to look at some of the materials that we have that were left over from his work that were here at the museum. Here we are up in the balcony level of the museum, near the south end in the taxidermy and Balch alcove. I'll be showing you here some of the materials, the raw materials that Balch started with to create his some of the imitation plants and other components of his groupings that he did for the museum. And he did make these all specifically for the Fairbanks Museum. And we actually have in the archives letters that he wrote to Franklin Fairbanks and Martha Tyler and others in the early days of the museum, in which he talks about finishing or creating some of the groupings. So I'll just show you quickly the rest of this display a little bit, and then some of the materials in the rail case. So here are some images of Balch. He was also a great photographer. He used the camera, not this particular camera, but this was very similar to one that he would have used. One of his projects in 19-teens was to photograph orchids, and we have in our collections a lot of the glass plates that he created and a lot of prints that he made of orchids and a few other wildflowers, and they're really quite amazing. If you can come in and see them in person. And he also was a great naturalist. He worked with Ina Zadie Howe, who you can see here, and out here, this action shot out collecting wildflowers for our flower table as well as for the museum's herbarium. And now we'll come over here, and these are some of the materials for creating the components of the dioramas. You can see to create the leaves, he would sandwich cloth like this between a couple of layers of wax that he would order. You can see here an unopened package that we have that he didn't end up using, and there were different shades, and then he would use molds like this that we presume he created, and there are others that we have of his, of different shapes and types. And he would order this moss material, and we're not sure if he actually made these flowers or if those are things that he ordered like this. And then pigments for creating different colors. And then he had things like this, glass and wax for creating imitation snow in particular. And another interesting component are these icicles, or imitation icicles. It's glass with a wire, a fairly heavy gauge wire, inserted into the thick end with a long piece here, which could be inserted into the background or backdrop of the grouping. And so you can see this is a nice three-dimensional imitation icicle here that would have been used. And you can see these in particular in our winter birds grouping that he did for us in 1917, which is one of the last ones he did for us. And you can see here a reproduction of one of his postcards that he created of his orchid photographs that he did. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.